Hi everyone, how are you doing today? I'm going to be sharing some thoughts on the novel Passing by Nella Larsen. This is not a book I had heard of before, but I stumbled across it on Goodreads within the last year and just thought it sounded absolutely fascinating. Nella Larsen was an author of the Harlem Renaissance movement. This was an African American cultural movement largely in the 20s and 30s, 1920s and 1930s, and centered in the Harlem neighborhood of Manhattan in New York City. And this is Larsen's most famous novel. As you can see, it was even adapted for a Netflix, I think, movie or miniseries. And she wrote just one other novel called Quicksand and was unable to get her third novel published, which I think is really unfortunate because though I'd never heard of her before, this novel was very impressive and just, I definitely want to read Quicksand at this point. But interesting thing about Larsen is that she had other careers as well. You know, writing wasn't her first career. She worked as a nurse and a librarian, and it says that in spite of having some setbacks in her writing career, she worked as a nurse until her death in 1964. I just love these Penguin Classics biographies, by the way. Usually I'll go on Wikipedia, but this is nice too, just as a quick reference and to get some idea of, you know, the author's lives and how that might have impacted their work, or clues you can find there to how their work might mirror their life. So what's this book about? This novel is about these two fair-complexioned black women who they had some like brief friendship in their childhood, Claire Kendry and Irene Redfield. And so they have this kind of brief interaction in childhood. It's not even, from what I remember from reading this, it's not even that deep of a friendship, but they were just generally acquainted with each other as they were growing up. Claire Kendry got shuffled off to some other relatives, and then she ended up growing up into a completely different lifestyle than Irene. Irene's our main character. She's not really the narrator because this is third person, but she's our main character and reconnects with Claire after many years and is shocked to find out that Claire is living a second identity as a white woman married to a very racist white man. But this man does not know that Claire is black. So I'm going to be just, like, that's kind of the setup for the novel. Not really any major spoilers there. I am going to be going into major spoilers though. I'm going to talk about this entire book. It is very short. It's all of 120 pages of actual reading. So if you're not interested in spoilers, feel free to stop the video, come back to it at a later time if you want to read it first. But I'm going to talk about this because I want to talk about how great Larsen's writing is, and also how this, for me, exemplifies what a really great novella is. And there's also parallels to The Great Gatsby here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but I might make some references there too. Passing. Right off the bat, we start out with this meeting between Irene and Claire as they're, I think they're in their late 20s, early 30s, thereabouts. And Irene is a married woman, and actually they're both married women. Irene has children, plural, and Claire has a single child named Marjorie. And what I really enjoyed about the opening scene is that it kind of plays with your expectations right out of the gate. We see this woman who's a fair-complexioned black woman having an iced tea on a hot summer day in this, snazzy hotel in New York I think it's New York. Okay, I'll be honest. This book goes between New York and Chicago, I think, a couple times, and I don't remember if the opening scene is in which city, but that's kind of beside the point. She's having hot tea. She's having iced tea on a hot summer day in the city. And at first I wasn't sure which character this was. I knew there were these two women that were kind of, you know, contrasted, but I didn't know which one it was. And as it turns out, it was actually Irene. Irene is, for a moment, passing. She's in a place where Black women would have been forbidden or kicked out if it was known what their race was, but she looks white. She's enjoying this tea after a long day, and just, you know, kind of, so Larsen's already like playing with your expectations. It's like, okay, so this character does pass occasionally. She does try to do that, but that's where she meets Claire, and Claire's the woman who, as Irene's looking at her at this restaurant, she's like, oh no, this woman's gonna find me out. She's gonna blow my cover. But as it turns out, Claire's the one that's living the double life, and that's how they reconnect. Just a very powerful scene. Now, I had every intention of reading this book, it's so short, in like a day or two. Unfortunately, I had to set it aside for various reasons, just because things have been busy with me and just got all other things to do. But it was such a powerful scene, and it gets even better from there, because then we have another scene in which Irene goes to visit Claire in her residence, and they meet this third woman, Gertrude. And Gertrude is also passing, but in her case, her husband knows she's Black, and they're just sharing the secret. So you've got these three levels of passing. You've got Irene, who's just casually doing it, Gertrude, who has come up with has landed in a relationship where it's working for her, but it's still secret, and then Claire, who has completely immersed herself in white culture, in this life of an aristocratic white woman, and just is totally in disguise, if you will. Not really disguise because she looks white, but her identity is disguised, let's put it that way. And her husband breaks into their tea party, and he's just a nasty character. He says the most insulting, humiliating, and degrading things to all the women present, but he doesn't know that he's insulting them. And I just thought that was also a very good scene. Again, echoes of Gatsby. I think the character of John Bellew, who is Claire's husband, definitely reminds you a little bit of Tom Buchanan in Gatsby, who's also very racist and so forth. Not as explicitly so in the book, but just through his reading material that were shown in Gatsby. I don't think this book is derivative, though. Now, this book was published in 1929, I believe. And though it was published in 1929, so Gatsby was published in 25, I think. So there's like a 4-year difference between these two. But what I liked about this book is it felt reminiscent, but not derivative. And what you're dealing with here, even though there's also a case of this person leading two lives that you also see in The Great Gatsby, I feel like the stakes are so much higher here, just because the implications of Claire being found out would be completely devastating. Devastating to her, devastating to her daughter, and just, you know, there's just a lot on the line here that I think, you know, if you look at the stakes in Gatsby, they're not quite that high. I think Jay had a little bit more leverage in what he could get away with and the kind of life he could live, where we're talking about a Black woman here who's taking an enormous risk. And I just think that was so fascinating. So that was what really drew me in. From there, the novel just continues to throw twists and turns at you. So after meeting Claire's totally like outwardly attractive but inwardly repulsive husband, so Irene goes home to her own family, and she has a scene with her husband. And at first you think that it's a very warm and loving and sweet marriage, and you really enjoy that contrast between the two marriages. And, you know, she has a sweet little banter with her husband, and she talks about how handsome he is, and, you know, you just feel this warmth come into the book as she connects with her own husband, Brian. But the book continues to take more twists and turns, because that whole lovely scene ends with an argument, and we're then shown another layer of the story, which is that Irene and Brian have this ongoing conflict about where they should live. Brian wants to get the heck out of the US. He wants to go live in Brazil, where he feels like his family will be treated better and his children will be safer. But Irene, our main character here, she feels like she's an American, you know, in spite of the challenges of living as an American Black woman. She wants to stay in America. She wants to raise her children there, and she just feels like it's a lot more stable. And this is something she goes back to often, is she wants stability. She wants to feel safe. And the thought of leaving America feels very unsafe to her, which is a whole nother layer we could talk about. I'm not going to go into it in detail, but just, I like how in the space of a novella, because obviously she can't develop everything 100%, but Larsen just throws out these little threads for you to think about and to chew on, but she's not like going to go into it in super depth. And I liked how she revealed that layer of the story when she did. Sometimes that can seem contrived, especially, I think where this is done poorly is in a lot of TV shows where they throw out some plot twist and you're like, really? Like, that doesn't seem plausible. But I think because we didn't even meet Brian till this point in the book, it seems very plausible, and, you know, the marital affection versus conflict seems very realistic, and I really enjoyed how we were just kind of, again, our expectations were subverted. And now we're dealing with another conflict that Irene has to resolve, or she thinks she has to resolve. Now, after these incidents, we'll call them, Claire makes great strides to insert herself into Irene's life. Irene does not wish to have Claire in her life. She thinks Claire is trouble. Irene wants smooth sailing. She has stability. But Claire is danger. Why is Claire danger? Claire is extremely beautiful. She is my sense from the book is that she's like Irene, but like if Irene was a lot more glamorous, gorgeous, beautiful, elegant, all the things, right? Sexy and seductive. Like all the things that Irene isn't, feels like Claire is. One of the things that has been like talked about with this book or mentioned in the promotional summaries and things, even on this book, is this idea that maybe there's like some kind of relationship developing between Claire and Irene, like some kind of attraction there. I honestly didn't see it that much, and I was looking for it, but I really didn't see it. I think Irene just has a girl crush on Claire, and I think that there's also a lot of jealousy. I don't really think there is a romantic relationship or anything like that. And this actually becomes more evident as the book goes on, because Irene begins to suspect her husband Brian of having an affair with Claire. And one thing that's very interesting towards the whole like last quarter of the book with the exploration of whether there's an affair and stuff is Irene becomes more and more stuck in her head, I would say. Like, a lot of that stuff is just her thinking about little things she thinks she saw, or the way she's reading her husband's expressions, or the way she's interpreting Claire's behavior. You don't really see any more of those kinds of conversations, those dialogues where a lot is revealed. And so the reader's left to wonder, well, what is the truth here? Is it true that Claire is a villainess, that she's a homebreaker, basically, that she's here to just get what she wants? I mean, that's kind of the image we're shown of her throughout the book from Irene's perspective, but it's never clear to me that that's necessarily the case. Claire thinks that she, on the other hand, is just a lonely woman. She wants to reconnect with the Black community, and she is finding her marriage to be more and more of a prison, and she feels like Irene has liberated her from that, and she just wants to spend as much time in Harlem as she can. So whenever her husband John is away on trips, she goes to Harlem and goes to, you know, parties and hangs out with Irene and her husband and so on. So there's a lot of ambiguity there, which is interesting because you've got rising conflict, but then you've also got rising ambiguity. And you also see in the midst of this, Irene struggle with her loyalties, because she feels like her very identity as a mother and as a woman is being threatened by Claire. But then she also doesn't want to blow Claire's cover because she feels a solidarity with her based on their race, which is curious because, you know, Claire isn't exactly doing much for the race herself. But nevertheless, Irene feels this loyalty to Claire that she struggles with as well. She, that is Irene, was caught between two allegiances, different yet the same. Herself, her race. Race. The thing that bound and suffocated her. Whatever steps she took, or if she took none at all, something would be crushed. A person or the race. Claire, herself, or the race. Or it might be all three. Nothing, she imagined, was ever more completely sardonic. Larsen loves the word sardonic, by the way. Earlier in the book, she uses the word sardony, which she meant to be the word sardonic, but as a noun form. I'm telling you, I just really like Larsen as a writer. Like, she's bold, she's funny, she's very insightful, and she does a lot in the very economic space that she has in this book. You know what? For all this talk of spoilers, I don't know if I want to give away the ending. I felt the ending was a little bit rushed, just a little bit rushed. I think she could have given it a few more chapters and developed it a bit more. Because at this point, I was coming up with several alternate endings that she could end the book with, and of course she did go with one of those, but it felt a little bit almost too tidy. Almost too tidy, and I'm not saying that's bad because you want your novella to be tidy, right? But I was found at the end, like, just thinking, is that it? Like, I wanted there to be more. Maybe I was almost hoping too much. I think the way she ended it was very poignant, perhaps even realistic, but I don't know. I had a lot of mixed feelings about the ending, and I think that it would have been interesting if she had taken a bit of a different approach. Interestingly, the ending is very similar to The Great Gatsby, so hopefully that's not, you know... like I said, I was going to talk about all the spoilers in this book, but what I'm trying to say here is that I think it was a good ending, but it wasn't necessarily the kind of ending that I was most hoping for. And I think more and more these days, I'm really enjoying an ambiguous ending, so that might just be on me, but it was a good ending. And this has been one of the highlights of the year so far. So if you are thinking about reading this, if you're like, well, I'm not sure, it's kind of a lesser known author, I feel like the hype is absolutely worth it. I think I will pick up Quicksand at some point. And because that's a completely different story, but I really enjoyed this one. And I think, you know, thinking about American classics, which is a whole nother video I could do, I do think this is a very worthy American classic, and I really love just the angle it takes, but the way it develops multiple layers, including race. Race is at the center, but there's many other different layers here too, so... Yep, that's my review of Larsen's Passing. A little longer than I even meant to go, but hope you found something useful here, and I'll see you next time. Bye!